the gravitas. We'll just go ahead and give it that, Paul. Right.
Oh my
Cool.
God, you guys are too much. All right.
Sweet. Well, okay. Let's get this show started, guys. Welcome everyone to the Logo Space. We're gonna have Paul again, of course, a returning guest. Paul is a good friend of mine. He's a good friend of the Logos Network. I Before we get started here, we'll go through a quick couple of disclaimers just so everyone is on the same page. Number one is any of the ideas or thoughts or considerations that Paul and I talk about, they are not affiliated with the Logos brand. These are products of our own mind, of our own thoughts. They're our own thoughts and part of our own identity. Also, we're probably going to talk about some projects in this space and some project ideas. And any project that we mention, of course, this is not financial advice. Do your own due diligence. Don't ape into a shit coin. And if you do it at your own peril. I think that's a given at this point. This is also typically a community space, but of course on Thursdays we have special guests, and the guest this time is Paul. So I'll probably speak to Paul. We'll have a bit of a conversation for roughly 60 minutes. Chair is on the stage. He can jump in if he wants as well at any time. But then typically after 60 minutes, if any of you guys have been in the conversation, you've been listening, you're welcome to come up and ask Paul questions or get involved in the conversation. A little bit of context for this discussion. A lot of you know, at least generally, that the privacy narrative and talking about privacy, talking about to some degree anonymity, but privacy specifically and privacy features have become more pronounced in the mainstream. More people are talking about it, especially VCs, more people in the space who may not typically be associated with the cypherpunk movement or crypto anarchy, which of course we are all fans of here. And when I reached out to Paul, I asked him, what do you want to, I want to get you back on the space. You and I, we have really good conversations. Plus you fit right in perfectly with the Logos community. What do we want to talk about? And Paul had mentioned the privacy narrative. And I thought, yeah, we've discussed that before on the space, but we haven't really gotten it. I think we may have went into some bit of detail one time, but it's been a while. But now things seems like they've amped up even more. So Paul's here to discuss that. But I want to give you an opportunity, Paul, to introduce yourself to the audience, for those folks who are here who really don't know about your background and your history, because you really are an OG, brother. You've been in the space a long time. So go ahead and kick it off. Welcome.
Great. Thanks so much, Sterling. Yeah, for everyone that's listening, my name is Paul Pui. I'm CEO and co-founder of Edge. I've been in this space since about 2014, co-founded the company that is still running to this day now. Gosh, 12 years running. We're on a dozen plus years. And we've, from day one, really been focused on, you can call us like self-custody maximalists. I won't call it privacy maximalists, but with a focus on privacy and delivering that to the masses. I like to say that we want to deliver privacy to the people that don't care about it, because when everyone uses it, the people that do care, such as us and people listening on the space, we get the benefit as well, right? And so that's what we've been building. We've got a self-custody app to let you trade many different cryptos, all the transparent ones, but a large selection of privacy ones as well. We were early supporters of Monero back in 2018. Zcash in full privacy mode in 2021 or 2022, like early 2022, I believe. Having talked with Zuko since about 2017, 18 about integration, it finally happened, almost half a decade later, when all the tools came into play. And I've seen the landscape of the narrative of privacy change, the ups and downs. And so I think I'm happy to see, like exactly what you said, Sterling, that the narrative is coming up again, and that people are talking about it, and not just all of us like more cypherpunk crypto anarchists, but also people in mainstream and in the media, and the traders and the macro economists that talk about crypto. And so I'm happy to hear that that's resurfacing, and love to get into the discussion, both hear what people think and also express what I've heard and how I feel about it.
Yeah, and definitely, by the way, this topic tends to bring up strong emotions, at least to myself. I would imagine the rest of the community as well, because it's one of those things where we feel like we've been involved for so long. It's like, oh, you guys are just now coming into the party. So there's a lot of
Yeah.
implications. A
We got
lot
to
of
welcome though,
implications.
right? Even though it feels like, there's a few people that are like, oh gosh, where were you all these years? We got to be welcoming to them. We got to make sure let's grow the community, much like early Bitcoiners, tried to grow the community, even though some people that came in with different ideology than the early Bitcoiners had. Well, there's still some positives in growing it with different philosophies coming into the fold.
Yeah, brother. This is going to end up being a longer part of the conversation, and maybe we're going to be putting the cart a little bit before the horse now. But one of the questions, of course, will be is like a lot of the folks coming into this into the privacy space and into the privacy scene and talking about it. One of the concerns is like, are they being authentic, right? Especially if it's some of the not like the average person who's engaging in the conversation, but there's some folks who are like, oh, we want privacy, but they're like, oh, we need all this KYC and AML, of course, potentially hijacking the whole ecosystem or the narrative, and or poisoning the well, right? So that's an issue. But let's save that, because I know you have a lot of thoughts on that, Paul. Let's just explore what this narrative shift, let's like the implications. Maybe discuss some of the talking points you've heard, and let's get your like personal take on the overarching like developments. Where's the messaging coming from?
Funny thing is, it's coming from the people I least expect. Now, granted, I don't think they have the same ideology that we have. They don't have the same cypherpunk roots that I think a lot of the people have. But I mean, has anybody in the audience raise your hand if you heard, Paul Atkins, chairman of the SEC, talk about privacy at the Privacy Roundtable that occurred like a month ago, where I think Zuko from one of the founders of Zcash had spoke. He talked humorously about how his mom wanted privacy, and hey, send this message to everyone you talk to, Zuko, that there's no reason why the government should be able to be snooping on everything I do, right? We have a Bill of Rights that says I should have privacy unless they have a warrant to to see what I'm doing and dig into my personal life. Well, they don't have a warrant, so therefore they shouldn't be able to snoop. It was like a hilarious little snippet that he had about a message from his mom. But this was at near highest levels of government. I absolutely was just floored that they even opened up this conversation to begin with, and that they had mentioned not things like privacy in the sense that like a bank would hold all the information, and that users would only be private from each other, but they literally mentioned words like zero knowledge proofs and the technology that enables privacy. They didn't mention Zcash explicitly, but they clearly invited a representative of Zcash to speak. So now, granted, don't get me wrong, I take everything that they say and that they do with a huge amount of skepticism, and I think everyone should too. Um, but the fact that narrative started from at that level means it ripple effects down to everyone that is skeptic and to everyone that's not skeptic, that's not a skeptic of what the government says. And it at least ignites the fire and says, well, shoot, if they're caring about it, might this now create a ripple effect of other people caring about it? And then now should I look at the technologies that enable privacy, whether they be messaging, VPN, blockchain, cryptocurrencies, and whatnot, and start to care about them from a completely shallow point of view? I'm talking about just the traders and number go up people. They're going to start looking at it. And, while I'm not a trader, I bought Bitcoin and some Monero and some Zcash and whatnot a while back, and it's really, I wouldn't even call it bought it. I had some because I wanted to use it, right? You know me, Sterling, I'm a utility guy, right? We're at PorcFest buying burgers for Monero. It's less of an investment. It's that I felt like I wanted to use it. But anyway, so I acquired some to use it. And I'm not the trader, but if the traders come in and do acquire for their own trading purposes and hauling purposes and investment purposes, well, that, I hate to say it, but it does ignite the fire, and it also it funds the ecosystem, right? People forget that the hodling narrative, which while I'm not a big fan of that being the only purpose of crypto, it helps fund the ecosystem. Money goes in the ecosystem. The people that did have and did early on care about Monero and Zcash now have elevated resources to fund development to advance the technology. So that message starting from high up, from the people that I almost couldn't care less about in general, right? Creates that ripple effect that actually could empower all of the cypherpunks and give us the resources to build the tools that ironically are going to be built to end those higher ups. And that's our end goal, right? Let's just end their power over us, right? And if they want to speak positively, great. Shocks me, but I'm not going to complain.
Yeah, that I don't think anyone here will disagree with that sentiment. That's a really astute observation, my friend. One of the things too to note, like with all the conversations happening, especially at the higher levels of government. You also have a lot of the VCs and VC backed ventures, specifically talking about the numbers on the different cryptocurrency projects, right? I have some notes here from some, let's see, this is a, okay, there's some information that comes from A16Z. Everyone's familiar with Andreessen Horowitz. Also, some information on just general VC insights, talking about Zcash being up 820%. You mentioned Zcash, Monero being up 130%, also in 2025. So it does seem like, and you mentioned, we're not just talking about just holding and just buying for the sake of number go up. We're talking about utility, but it is interesting to note that a lot of these privacy coins have started to go up as a result of a lot of these folks talking about and being interested in the privacy space. I'm not making a case that's good or bad. I'm just pointing that out, that is a fact. Also, it seems that like there's been a global finance initiative to move to on-chain privacy, and this has been also talked about a lot from a VC perspective. What do you know about the VCs talking about this and the impact on the market? This does seem like it plays into your point, Paul, that this is definitely inspiring maybe more people to get involved in developing the protocols around privacy, doing
Huge investments in crypto, right? Especially A16Z. They've got an entire department called A16Z Crypto, and they put bets in like half a dozen different companies, and two that immediately come to mind because I'm pretty close with their CEOs are NIM, which is a blockchain built on the Cosmos SDK, but also a mixnet, allowing people to send traffic over the internet with immensely huge IP obfuscation. Like, it shuffles your traffic and puts in noise and puts in delay. It's insanely slow, but you get absurdly high levels of privacy, IP level privacy, right? This isn't like transactions on a blockchain level privacy. So they invested in them, and they'd also invested in Alio, which is a full privacy by default smart contract blockchain. So they put bets into these, and in addition to, of course, dozens of other companies in the transparent blockchain space. And one of the narratives that they had really mentioned is the hindrance of adoption of cryptocurrency because of its transparent nature. Now, while many in the TradFi space like, oh, look, blockchain is getting adopted, right? You've got ETFs and you have big banks saying they're going to be using chains to transfer funds and whatnot. There came a realization that a lot of institutions do not want to be using crypto, do not want to be using blockchains because of the transparency. Now, while privacy seems to like that word privacy seems to have cypherpunk roots, and seems like only cypherpunks care about it, you don't realize that a lot of institutions do too, right? Like, if you're a financial trader, if you're a Morgan Stanley, and you are putting your trades, your acquisitions, your bags, basically, what are your bags and your holdings on chain, that gives all your competition insight into what you're doing, right? And it's a known fact that if you expose what you're about to do before you do it, you're at a disadvantage, and someone's going to front run that. And this is like total TradFi trading mentality. This is not cypherpunk at all, right? But because of that, they want to make sure they hide what they are doing, hide what they have. You're at a disadvantage, and someone's going to front run that. And this is like total TradFi trading mentality. This is not cypherpunk at all, right? But because of that, they want to make sure they hide what they are doing, hide what they have, hide what they're about to do, and hide what they've, generally speaking, what they have done, right? Although some of that gets exposed for regulatory reasons. So, luckily, all of that still falls under the umbrella term of privacy, even though that might be different on a level of what we care about versus what they care about. We kind of get to fold it under the same umbrella, and therefore try to advance tools that accomplish both. Now, and so once again, getting back to like, why do the VCs care? They want the chains and the investments that they've put in to get broader adoption than just speculate on a coin. And in order for them to do that, they realize that, hey, these institutions aren't going to adopt this stuff with full transparency. So they're now pushing the narrative, hey, we need privacy. And hence why they invested in these other protocols like Alio. And I think there's another one, Aztec, I believe, which is a layer 2 on top of Ethereum, which is I think, imminently launching in mainnet. I think Q1 or Q2 of this year. And so they're investing in these things, so they're realizing this is a hindrance to adoption. Now, do they care about individual personal privacy for the layman? Maybe they'll say they do, right? Maybe they say that they will, but I genuinely doubt that that's really running through the blood of the VC firms. They'll say what narrative they need to get something adopted, but so be it. If it's going to drive our agenda, that's great, right? We can build the tools. We'll have the funding to build the tools because more people will buy the tokens or more people will fund the projects, and so be it. Now, here's where I think we have to be careful. Privacy is nuanced, right? What does it exactly mean to be private? What does it mean to be transparent? And what does it mean to be something in between? What's good enough for us, the people that are on this space, versus what's good enough for them, TradFi, the bankers, the Morgan Stanleys of the world. What's good enough is vastly different between those two. And I feel confident that the institutions are going to push for their good enough, which is going to compromise the ability for us to build our good enough, right? So their good enough is what exists already today in the TradFi space, and they would probably just push to have that on chain, which is, the TradFi space. We do a banking transfer, and I can't see, like, if I sent you, a Zelle payment, Sterling, I can't see how much money you have. You can't see how much money I have. You don't know my transactions. I don't know your transactions. That's fully obfuscated, but the banks do. Right, your bank knows how much you received. They know who you received it from, and they know all your future transactions. And kind of same for mine. True with PayPal. True with your E-Trade account. Like, all that's transparent to both the government and to the financial institution, because the government can subpoena the financial institution, if not have all their data streamed over to CIA, servers. That's the good enough for the TradFi world, which basically means there's a backdoor. Right, like, all of the banks are the backdoor. Right, here's an API that the government can access to see all of the streaming transactional data. That's not good enough for us. Can you implement that backdoor in a blockchain implementation? Absolutely, and there's talks of that. So what's good enough for us? Well, I would like to think I have full privacy and I can disclose only what I want to disclose to whoever I want to disclose. That's not unlike Zcash, where you can expose a view key to show all your transactions. Monero, you currently can't, although I hear it's on the roadmap. Monero, you can expose a view key which doesn't expose all your transaction data. It exposes a subset of it. There's a transaction key in Monero where I can expose the details of a single transaction that I sent and nothing else, right? So this selective disclosure is a very, very key piece of what needs to be pushed forward. And every time a new protocol comes out, I always ask, like, okay, is there a backdoor? Who gets to see the transactions, or is it just selective disclosure? And who gets to select? Who is the person that has the key to select? Is it the user? Is it the protocol developer or some company, or is it someone that spins up a pool, right? A privacy pool. There's a project on Ethereum called Privacy Pools. It's who had launched it. I believe his name is Amin.
Amin,
right?
Yeah.
And I'm at fundamental disagreement with that project. Right? He's a very popular voice.
100%.
Right? Okay. All right. So glad at least one other person, is on the same page as me, because its concept is that someone spins up a privacy pool. People can put money into it, transact between it, but the person spins up the privacy pool has full visibility into that pool, right? And so that to me is the banking system. That's TradFi, and we don't gain our good enough. That's TradFi good enough, not ours. And so I do not at all vouch for that project or recommend that is driven to adoption. Now, the irony of it is that some projects, like Aleo, I'd have to dig into this a little bit because I haven't used Aleo myself, but I know some of the staff have launched stable coins, which are highly regulated, like USDC, on chain, but have default privacy and only selective disclosure and selected by the user, which means I should be able to send USDC to you, Sterling, and nobody knows that I did it and how much I did, right? And they don't know which address sent it and which address received it. I need to validate this because I haven't done it myself, honestly. But that's the thing that shocks me. And is it that we've been able to Trojan horse or, talk in large, big words to fairly ignorant government officials and say, oh, there's selective disclosure, that's good enough? Because if you ask someone, well, they have a key and they have to disclose the transaction, but you don't get to wide sweepingly monitor and surveil everyone. Am I still coming in, by the way? Because I'm getting little messages on my phone saying that connection lost, reconnecting.
I can hear you.
Oh, okay, cool. So I guess X is just being a little bit, conservative on what the connection is. But yeah, so that was seeing that a privacy chain allowed what I would call a very, very regulated stablecoin, what some would call, backdoor CBDC. If anyone knows Aaron Day, he calls all the stablecoins backdoor CBDCs. And so the fact that that can transact on a privacy blockchain with privacy by default and no backdoor shocks me, but obviously pleasantly shocks me. And those are the solutions that, as a community, we need to push hard, push forward with before the, not good enough for us, but good enough for them solutions get pushed out. And so I invited people to try it out. Maybe on the next privacy-focused logo spaces, people can kind of give their comment on what they thought and, their research or other projects similar to it that provide that level of privacy, but at the same time, usability with things like stablecoins.
Paul, you said a lot of things. I jotted a couple of things down. As you were speaking, it was kind of funny. You mentioned privacy pools. It was already in my head. Halfway through. I was because he, by the way, Amin came and actually gave a talk at our event in DevConnect when we were in Latin America in Argentina in Buenos Aires. So anyway, it was just a whole funny thing. But I'm going to get into that a little bit, but I do want to mention something real quick. I want to just make sure something's abundantly clear. I agree completely with you, with your position with regard to privacy. Some aspect of it is already mainstream without us having to invoke it, which is what you're getting at, I think, Paul, where most people, even if they're not explicitly aware of it, they expect some level of privacy in their personal lives, right? We sometimes use the example of going to the restroom. Everyone expects privacy during that period. And this is, of course, extended to a variety of different aspects of our life. And some of it is just considered to be a foregone conclusion. Now, of course, when we talk about cypherpunks and crypto anarchists, maybe this does deserve a bit of elaboration, especially if there's anybody in the space who's not familiar with these movements. So, Eric Hughes famously said that cypherpunks write code. The idea behind a cypherpunk is that these individuals are purposeful activists. They're actually out there trying to develop tooling and potentially anonymity enhancing tooling for the purposes of helping an individual defend themselves against a surveillance regime or a surveillance apparatus. So there's a defensive stance or posture taken by cypherpunks that doesn't exist in like the normal person's like conception of privacy. But it is still critical that everyone generally understands that privacy is important. It's just that cypherpunks largely have wanted to take it to the next level. And yes, with your comment on privacy pools, that project is not aligned with the cypherpunk conception of privacy, even though that's sometimes how Amin and their team tries to characterize it. I mean, my position is we'll get into this, but one of the things that he tries to say, and maybe we can discuss this, is that you don't want to have to commingle, and there's a reason why we need to have like more KYC and AML, or we need to be transparent with some aspects of or at least have backdoors to some degree, because you may end up trading funds or being involved with some type of terrorist activity. Like the bad guy might actually, you may be commingling your funds with bad guys, and that might end up supporting some kind of narco terrorist or some kind of Middle Eastern terrorist. So maybe it will help if we talk about that a bit, Paul, and you can give your kind of position on that, so we can justify why we do what we do as cypherpunks and why we have this positioning, and then we'll kind of drive it back around to the mainstreaming talk. I think this is critical, though.
Yeah, I think I dropped off for a little bit, but yeah, you were talking about the concern of commingling funds and potentially supporting narco-terrorism and child pornography or whatever a government deems like the bad stuff. And so fundamentally, my first response to that is the definition of illicit activity. right? Money, and especially crypto being very global money, crosses over arbitrary borders. And so therefore, it doesn't know a specific geographic region's definition of illicit activity, right? It doesn't know that, it is okay to pay for a hooker in Amsterdam and it's not in California, right? It's completely agnostic to that. It just doesn't know. So trying to enforce some level of morality onto money that is global is effectively broken. It's not something that you can enforce, should enforce. In the same and in that same sense, why are we taking money specifically and enforcing some level of morality? And when we talk about illicit activity, I'm going to call it just morals, right? Because morals are subjective, just like rules are subjective, laws are subjective. And sure, we might have some very high what do you call it, umbrella laws that as humanity we all agree on, like it's wrong to kill someone, although maybe governments don't agree with that, right? But generally speaking, almost every rule in law is subjective, and in general probably just roots into morality, which is subjective as well. In that sense, why are we, of all the things that you need as a human to do an unmoral act, right? There's all the different tools that you need to do to create an unmoral act, whether it be, once again, child pornography or terrorism. Why are we singling out money as the one thing that you need to KYC and track and surveil, when there's 100, if not 1,000 different tools that you will need to hijack a plane, take photos of 5-year-olds in sexual acts? Right? You'll need a ton of tools. Should we KYC cameras? Should we, KYC ownership of a computer, which you're going to need to broadcast that information and store it in a hard drive, an SSD drive? There are just so many tools necessary. Why is money singled out as one of the things that needs that level of surveillance and regulation? So my take is it shouldn't be. It's just one of the many tools. And so, and in that sense, there's also many other techniques that law enforcement can use to go after, quote unquote, their definition of the bad guys. Go and use all those other tools, right? But let money be inherently, just neutral, just like every other tool that a bad guy could use, right, to make an illicit act. Those are all neutral tools, and money is as well a neutral tool. And I think we've been, Amin has grown up in an era where money is just simply like, oh, it's supposed to be surveilled, right? I'm not sure how old he is, but the vast majority of people today really haven't experienced a near 95% plus cash-based society where money wasn't surveilled. It was just another tool, right? Just like you can go and trade, back in the days of barter, you trade chickens for pigs, right? Cash was just another barter tool, right? And it had that same level of privacy as you would when you bartered. And the digital era of money introduced the ability to surveil, not necessarily the moral need to surveil money. It just simply added the ability to do that. And if you grew up in that era and that's all you know is digital money, you've almost been kind of brainwashed with the thought that it's supposed to be surveilled and I'm supposed to let government know what I'm doing because to prove that I'm not a bad guy. But you don't have to rewind time very far back, 50 years, and that was not the case. In the same sense, it's also wasn't the case that I should allow government to surveil my communications. Whereas now you just assume it on email, like, sure, Google can surveil that and the government can get that as well. So I think it's a narrative switch that just happened over time. There's no inherent need to surveil money, just like there's no inherent need to surveil any other tool. And Amin just, I think, came about in an era where, and like everyone else, I can't even blame him because he's one of many. He's like the 90 percentile plus that just come with this assumption. And we need to break that assumption. And if we can break that assumption and change that narrative and get people used to what they were already used to 50 years ago, then that's how we achieve what effectively is everything inside of the Cypherpunk Manifesto and regain the privacy, at least for money. And money being one of the most powerful tools to achieve, what we want to accomplish with privacy, liberty, freedom, right? is the piece that we need to liberate again, because it kind of got shackled over the past, 30, 50 years. And let's free it. Once we free the money, then we kind of free ourselves and we free the world.
Bingo, you nailed it, brother. I think too, one of the things that comes up to in my mind is whenever you make these kind of like arguments that some aspect of money has to be surveilled, or some aspect of the economy needs to be surveilled, or society needs to be surveilled, that's the argumentation, the type that you get into is really a slippery slope, right?
Absolutely.
Because if this one thing needs to be surveilled, oh, maybe this thing needs to be surveilled, right? Next thing you know, you have an Orwellian dystopia of epic proportions that just spirals out of control, right? And that's the reason why you need folks like us, folks like you guys with Edge Wallet and your diehard dedication to developing privacy wallets, privacy tooling, like Logos, of course, because these folks exist that want to continue ramping up the surveillance apparatus, even if they're not doing it purposely. Maybe they're just unwitting participants in the way that the system is developing its apparatus, which is exactly what you're pointing to. The other thing I think about, and actually I think Jared mentioned this, they got into this argument, Amin and Jared did, a debate actually at the event, which was, by the way, the P2P Hacker Lounge that we had in Buenos Aires, where it's like, okay, if you're concerned about terrorists, that's also a political position that you're taking, because one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter, right? So it's the moral claim, that the moral issues that you were talking about, where there's subjective differences in that. So you end up playing a power game or a power dynamic. So one thing that I think was really astute, our friends over at DarkFi, Armor, he was there and he told me, well, Sterling, how I think it should be is like any kind of issue that could cause harm should be handled on the social layer, not the technological layer. And I thought that was
that's absolutely true. As humans, we definitely disagree on a lot of things, and so let's discuss that. Let's debate that, and all those things change too over time, right? The social layer changes. It's a very dynamic thing. Why embed that into money, which is meant to, ironically, retain value, which fiat hasn't, but it's meant to be able to transfer value at some level of stability. It's not meant to enforce an opinion. And so, especially one that dynamically does change over time. So, yeah, I can't agree more with that. And so, when you said the DarkFi team, was Amir Taki part of the discussion? Because I can imagine him just railing on any concept of like a surveilled privacy protocol.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. We had actually invited Amir, and he was slated to come, but I think he's been having some travel issues lately.
When hasn't he had travel issues? Right. He's definitely a big target, and so he expresses pretty strong opinions. He builds some controversial stuff, and not only does he build controversial stuff, he names it controversial things. And so he's all about like just telling it like it is, nothing sugar coated. But we need people like that in this world, right? And he definitely sparks the cypherpunk movement and the roots. Even though some of us in the movement, I think, I remember when we first met him in our early days of Airbits. For those that don't know, we had, our company actually is technically still called Airbits Inc. And we launched a Bitcoin wallet in 2014 with privacy as a focus, and we'd worked with Amir to try to put in some privacy features in Airbits at the time. And we likened his project at the time was called Dark Wallet, for anyone that doesn't remember. And it had, mixing in it, stealth addresses, and it was built on a stack called LibBitcoin, which, he disagreed with the core developers at the time. And so he went and fully re-implemented the entire code base of Bitcoin, made it modular, built a wallet that accessed that full node code base that he had built. And so we saw what he was doing. We wanted to partner with him and, help. We contributed to LibBitcoin, and incorporated some of that tech into Airbits at the time. We never got to the stealth addresses, unfortunately. They ended up being a bit too slow for its time to work properly. But we like to say that, hey, we were kind of the shiny, friendly exterior to what Dark Wallet was to kind of like the deep crypto anarchists. We wanted to build the dark wallet, but for the layman and the grandma that didn't realize they were getting dark wallet. That was our mission at that time, although the technology was pretty hard to integrate, especially into a 2014 mobile device. But I think there's a good fit for each of those, right? The people that are building really deep, difficult technology early on that's hard to use, that's adopted by the minority, like the sub 1%. And then those of us that take that technology and adapt it so that it becomes a bit more accessible. So I love that the intersection of those two is one that I think is pretty key for most technology. And I think it's going to be extra key for privacy technology as a whole.
Yes, sir. I mean, I love the background story too with the mirror. What I was thinking of when you were talking to Paul is like you guys at Edge Wallet and previously Airbits are really the perfect bridge, right, to be able to discuss really sensitive topics potentially around privacy and anonymity, and make it palatable for people who may have they may get a sense of cringe or a sense of not wanting to accept a more cypherpunk.
That's for the sub percentage of the population isn't going to do it. And so I invite all of you who maybe are in the echo chamber of the people that would come into this spaces to go to the lion's den of the opposite side, right? And see what it's like to talk to them. It's hard, but it's also enlightening at the same time, because they might bring about really valid questions, right? Concerns. They're the ones that are going to ask the question like, oh, well, I don't want to be supporting terrorist financing. They're going to ask those kind of things. And our ability to discuss, very objectively as much as possible, why we value the things that we value. Because in an echo chamber, this is easy, right? We can just rah cheer the way Amir Taki does, and everyone's like, stand up clapping. That's easy. It's when you're in the lion's den that it becomes really hard, when you're truly challenged by everyone around you. And we've taken on that challenge. We're in the thick of it. For those of you that know, headquarters of Edge is in California and San Diego, right? It's not the roots of cypherpunk in any way, shape, or form. I'm surrounded by industries that I despise. Like the military, number one, it's all over this place, right? Navy headquarters is like 4 blocks from my office. Biotech, big pharma, right, is one of the biggest industries. The biggest college here, UCSD, is basically feeder to biotech. So I'm constantly having arguments with people in the tech scene here, right? It's just like constant battle. But am I able to open the eyes of a few people that are in the lion's den? Yes, I've seen it happen. a doctor I host an event called Tech Coffee every Monday morning. It's just a couple hours on Monday morning, and people in the tech space, not specifically crypto, come out and just chat about the trends in the space. A lot of people are looking for jobs, because the market's really tough. We chat about it, and one of the entrepreneurs that shows up initially was a doctor, and he still shows up to this day, even though when he first came out, I basically chewed out most of his beliefs, in big pharma and whatnot. But he keeps showing up, and he's like one of those I'm chipping away at, and showing him kind of the way of freedom and what's our mission in this space, while still talking about general tech and stuff that's kind of interesting to the normies and whatnot. And so being in this Lion's Den is both tough and rewarding, because as they say, they don't doing easy stuff isn't what the I won't call it the successful people, but it's not what you should be focusing your life around, right? That you don't accomplish things by just tackling the easy stuff, because easy stuff is what anyone can do. The hard stuff is what really sets people apart, and it's hard going into discussions in the Lion's Den, but I think that's where you make change.
Yeah, Paul, you're exactly right. I think it feels really it's easy for us. For one is we, especially in our space, I think we really enjoy community and having people, and I guess in some ways having an echo chamber provides a bit of solace.
It is. It's necessary at times.
Comfort, right?
Yeah. You need to at times.
Right. I want to give it to you, being in San Diego, and I've been to your office, by the way, that San Diego is a beautiful city, right? The weather's perfect, but at the same time, you are surrounded by all this just complete inanity, and being able to deal with that, right, and confront it on a daily basis. You have, I tip my hat to you, sir. You have top props, because that is not an easy thing to do. So again, thanks for that. By the way, I want to take just a minute because of being mindful of time. We have about I don't think we talked about time, Paul. We usually go for about 90 minutes. I want to first make sure that's okay with you. We'll go for about another 10 here. There's a couple of things I want to touch on with the mainstreamization of privacy. And then we have some people who want to speak. Corey with Logos came up. I know that Corey will have some good thoughts. Also, CK Cardano came up, and I think there's another request we'll see about inviting up. I do want to remind everyone real quick as I reset the room here that when you come up, anyone who comes up to speak, please keep the content topical with what we're talking about. Also, we've had some issues lately of people wanting to come up and shill or post comments shilling their products and their projects. We're here speaking on a specific topic, largely related to technology, privacy, and philosophy. So let's kind of try to keep it as topical as possible, please. We ask that as a favor. We don't really like to block people or censor people, of course. So please try to keep it like within the domain, at least of this conversation. Now, Paul, what I wanted to get into just briefly, talking about the mainstreamization of privacy and thinking about where we're at right now in this ecosystem. I think all of us would agree this is largely a good change. It's a good change of pace for the industry to be focused on privacy, because we know there were some issues, right, with Bitcoin, where people thought Bitcoin was more private originally. I know that I did, being in the space a long time as well. I thought it was more private than it really was. I think a lot of us knew that it was quote unquote pseudonymous, right, rather than anonymous, but it actually barely even constitutes pseudo-anonymity. It's basically just a private surveillance chain. And I agree with Aaron, a lot of Aaron Day's points on this as well. You mentioned Aaron earlier. So let's talk about real quick, like what are the catalysts? I think Bitcoin is definitely one of them, but what are the other catalysts that are driving sort of the shift in perspective? Some of it is like maybe the Trump administration and its changes, I think, probably have an impact. We hadn't touched on this. So I want to hear your thoughts on this, and I'm sure the community would enjoy them as well.
Yeah, I think it goes back to, what I had mentioned with respect to, at least from the viewpoint of this price narrative, right? Like we've seen this notable price bump, Bitcoin was down in 2025 from the start of the year, January 1st to December 31st. And privacy coins were mostly up. Obviously, like Zcash up, 10x, almost 20x, Monero up 3 to 4x. And so the price narrative, I would love to think, I mean, my dream is the reason why those coins are up is because they're the ones that are necessary for true utility and transactional purpose. Like if you actually want to transact and buy stuff and trade and pay people in those coins, then you'll need a privacy layer, and those deliver it. Ultimately, I don't think that was the case yet here. right? I think the case is that, oop, did I connect and disconnect?
You're
I'm still
good.
good? Okay, yeah. X is definitely warning me a whole bunch about like, I'm getting connected and reconnected, but if I'm good, I'm good. Anyway, and so I don't think it was that case where we just suddenly drove up massive utility in the coins and therefore people needed it and acquired it to transact with it. I don't believe it was the case because I don't believe the transaction volume on the privacy layers had really amped up. Someone please correct me if I'm wrong. I haven't looked at the transaction counts on like Zcash, Monero, Xano, Pirate Chain as of recent. Did the volumes pump up before the price moved, or if it's post price movement, like price moving up and suddenly you see a bunch of transaction volume, that's likely people acquiring it, right? Like it's speculative. So I do think there is this ripple effect of the administration, them talking positively about it, the VCs talking positively, as in this is the next level of crypto. That's the moat necessary to have a chain that can't be competed against easily. So I think that is the ripple effect. Now, it's ripple affecting across all the chains, almost all the chains that have some level of privacy, even if the VC might really only care about one or two that they've invested in. Now, what's the sticking piece, though? Even though they've kind of lit the fire, how do we keep the flame burning and grow the flame? We need to use it now. We actually have to actually start driving utility to these protocols. We've started using it to a lesser degree, in the sense that it's not a lot of transaction volume, but we talked about Monero a bit and Zcash. All of our company has been paid in Bitcoin since 2014, since we founded the company. But that's always been a bit of a privacy risk, right? Like the company goes and deploys money to all of its staff. Well, Edge, if we wanted to use full detailed chain analysis, can know when different.
Okay, yeah, now you have dropped off, Paul.
Oh God.
All right, we're gonna give Paul just a minute for him to reboot. I definitely think he's on to something here. By the way, we have to discuss the issues around Chainalysis and blockchain.
Am I back?
Yep. Yeah, you're back. Continue, sir.
Okay, where did I leave off? How many seconds of drop off did I lose?
You had mentioned Chainalysis. I think that was the thing that stuck in my mind.
Oh, was it Chainalysis about, like, did I mention how we pay our staff in Bitcoin?
Yep.
Okay, yeah. So we pay our staff in Bitcoin, and of course, if Edge or our staff wanted to use very detailed Chainalysis, they could determine what other people are paid within our staff. We could determine when a staff member goes and sends money to an exchange, right? And likely will sell some of their coin, and also how much they're hodling. So we did finally roll out in a way a privacy coin that people can get paid in, which is BTCX on Xano. And so it allows us to kind of still keep the stability of a non-stable coin, which Bitcoin is relatively stable compared to most other altcoins, but have that privacy such that when we pay out, right, you have the full Monero level privacy. Us as a company have no idea what that person is doing with their money. The person that receives the money has no idea what Edge is holding, and also what Edge does with our money. So, and people don't know what other staff members are doing with their money. So that is a key piece, and I think that needs to get more broadly adopted. Right, these privacy layers more broadly adopted, especially on a transactional level, and that's how we keep the flame burning that the VCs and the government started. Right, they started the flame. They brought eyeballs because of price up. Right, price went up, eyeballs came in. Now let's actually go and use it, and that'll keep the price up, but also drive broader adoption, getting more eyeballs into the fold, saying, hey, should I be transacting this? Should I start holding some of this for the sake of utility?
Yeah, 100%. And I just want to mention something briefly, and then we're going to get into the audience questions and comments. We have a lot of hands up here. This conversation have definitely ignited some some thoughts and commentary, probably a lot of passion in the room as well. So one of the things that's important to mention too is with a lot of the Trump administration's rescinding of different people's sentences, a lot of the pardons that Trump has given, especially when it comes to people who either developed privacy or working within the context of privacy. Ross is one of the first ones that come to mind. We've talked about a couple of times on the space. There also, I think, seems to be a lot more a stronger level of comfort for developers, right? Something I mention often is A lot of people have suffered, especially developers, from the chilling effect, which is what happens when governments go after developers specifically for developing privacy tooling. A lot of them may be scared to work and even leave projects because they don't want to be involved in the space. But there does seem to be the comfort level has seemed to rise a little bit as a result of some of these pardons. But of course, there's still a lot of ground that needs to be covered, right? Because we're still dealing with Tornado Cash, Samurai Wallet. Guys, I think Keon just, I mean, he spent his last days with his family leading up until Christmas, and then now is in prison. I think he has to spend a, what is it, a 5-year prison sentence. So that we still have some issues that need to be contended with. But I think overall, developers are probably sitting a little bit more comfortably than they were. A lot of these cases that are now coming to fruition were started in the Biden era administration, which was very strongly anti-crypto. This is not a defense of the Trump administration or general politics whatsoever, but it is to say that it is indicative of a shift that has happened, generally speaking, when it comes to privacy tokens. Cool. I just wanted to mention that. Paul, you can briefly comment on it, but I want to allow the speakers who are in the space now to comment. I think I'm going to let Chair go first because he was in the space at the very beginning, and then it's CK Cardano, and then Corey, and then Ashes. So we're going to go in that order. But if you want to comment briefly on what I just said about these, go ahead, Paul.
I mean, I almost entirely fully agree, right? Like I said, especially with the part like not necessarily vouching for the Trump administration. Like I'm wholeheartedly against the administration in many ways. They're the lesser of the two evils, right? They're simple politics all over again, still for the most part a uniparty, but they have at least made some more pro crypto stances and more pro privacy stances. I don't think Trump's going to pardon anyone else. I'll be honest. I don't think anyone else is getting a pardon other than Ross. And the only reason Ross got one is because he needed to get elected, and that's it. Other than getting elected, he's done. Right now, he won't go, and I don't think the administration is going to be the Biden administration go after other additional developers. That's extra effort that looks bad. But him not pardoning anyone, it's like you're just staying the course, right? You're not going through any extra effort. So I don't think it, unfortunately, because I'd love to free Ian, right? I would have loved if Roger was freed on a pardon versus having to pay a ransom to do so. But I generally don't think it's going to happen. So that's my hopefully quick comment on that.
Yeah, I can see that. That's an extremely valid point. I have some comments. We won't get into the full conversation. Let's have the speakers on the stage get into it. Chair, you had your hand up first, my friend. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you, Paul, for being here. This is a great conversation. We've touched on a few topics near and dear to my heart, specifically San Diego. Just to get to San Diego, you have to drive through the length of Camp Pendleton, and from time to time, you might have an Apache escort or see some wild stuff. And it's sort of like entering the gateway into a pseudo parallel weird place. But it's interesting, San Diego. You mentioned USD, which is a Jesuit operation. Interesting. Militaries all over the place. And then you can get on the 8 and go east straight to Ocotillo Wells, where motocross was invented. Contrast. But to the main topic of the space of mainstreaming of privacy, feels like I've been through this before a number of times, and I'm not saying I'm an outlier, but I think outliers typically, like I know some real outliers, and they're always early to things. They pick up on trends 5 or 10 or more years before they're going to happen, or they identify the conditions that exist that could lead to certain things. And we're seeing it now with privacy. The Pinche Winklevoss twins took ownership of cypherpunk.com and at cypherpunk, I believe, not that I do not implore you to go visit it, but like, if that doesn't indicate the level of fuckery that is at play now when the Winklevoss twins own the domain cypherpunk.com and are proudly saying, we are cypherpunks, or whatever it is that they're saying. I mean, that's an indicator, if nothing else. And it's very much like this is a metaphor I use a lot. but it's very much like seeing the band that you used to watch in 100 and 200 person capacity clubs graduate to a larger label and all of a sudden have exposure to more people, which is both good and bad. You certainly want a band or an artist that you support to have some success, but at the same time, you know that things are going to change as a result of this new paradigm. And, co-opting a narrative, reframing a narrative is something that the powers that be are very good at doing throughout history. So when, we touched on privacy pools and, the flavor of privacy that is offered might not exactly be in line with what our expectations are or in line with the definition of privacy in the first place, but okay. But it's fun. It's always fun for me when we bring up the old adage, if you're not with us, you're with the terrorists. Like, there's another indicator that perhaps as soon as when your opening line is like, if you don't use this, then you're just helping the terrorists. And it's like, okay, I think I've heard this one before too. Mission accomplished. But a core tenet of all of it, like the cypherpunks poured the foundation for Bitcoin and crypto. And the chickens are coming home to roost, to use another old catchphrase from 20 years ago or more. The chickens are coming home to roost, and that within the concrete of that foundation was the ethos, the tenets of privacy. If you looked at, I saw it coming in a way because Vitalik really leaned into blogging about privacy again about a year ago, maybe 9 months ago. And anytime Vitalik blogs, it unleashes this armada of developers and people now like looking into and developing and researching what it is that he's talking about. So I knew this wave was coming. That was one of the indicators for sure. So here we are, our favorite band signed to RCA Records. God help us all. But I think overall it's a positive. And again, Paul, thank you for coming, and I think you're one of my favorite attendee or guests on these spaces. So thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Much appreciated, and can't agree more. You've definitely created a great analogy for the transition of crypto from like the early days to today. Hopefully, unlike a lot of the bands that sign and therefore their music just starts to degrade, we're able to keep a bunch of hits rolling that the original listeners will still love.
Yeah, because the first thing that comes to mind, you guys talk about this, is what do we talk about when our bands that we used to love reach a mainstream success? Oh, well, they sold out, right? We don't want to sell. We don't want to be the sellouts, right? We want to we want to stay true to the roots, right? We want to bring that energy and that elan vital that we had as where we came from, right? That original impetus. Cool. All right, we have, I think next in the list here is CK Cardano. Welcome to the stage.
Hello, Sterling. Thank you so much for just having me up, and shout out to Logos, the Logos Network, and Paul Puey. Is it Paul Puey or Paul Puey?
You got it right, Paul Puey.
Paul Puey. Paul Puey, I have seen some of your work before, some great interviews, but never before with sort of the depth that you have been able to sort of organically navigate and touch on. So it really gives us a sense of sort of where you're coming from, because this isn't a package sort of situation. So I just have to say how much I am appreciating, even in silence, the way that you're navigating the lion's den, bro. And amen. Like, to be able to say, okay, I understand that whole, what yeah, the Promethean fire of freedom that Satoshi Nakamoto lit was that for the first time, everyone on the planet with an internet connection and a smart device could custody the value that they create in their finite time alive. And then we got the 21 million Bitcoin UTXOs. And then, as Sterling was pointing out, that pseudonymous assumption. And then you go, hold on, participants in the network, heuristics, just patterning XYZ, right? We're running Bitcoin. Shout out to Hal. But amen, bro. So how do we take that liberty and grow? And Chair Oh my gosh, bro. Lambda all day. Yeah. How much was there? So much depth. Time travel. Big fan of time travel, bro. And entering those interesting gates and falling through the mathematics. To which, yeah, fuck, we're all privy and subject, though not all necessarily conversant, and shit, perpetually humbled. And although I do love freedom, is how I'll land that thought there. But I guess, to refine this, I'm just loving this conversation on privacy and Gordian solutions, Paul. Amen. Like, if we can decouple money from state, all right, the fact that we've got the 21 million, that's the grand unified UTXO theory, right? And yeah, the Winklevi twins and the Zcash. And did you notice, amen, a non-hostile environment for developers, but then that monetary thing when your band is, are they sold out? So the way that, just to kind of just have some thoughts here, Zcash network, if we know it's going to have $1 trillion worth of TradFi capital in there, because it's just like we did with Facebook, now we're co-opting. Because again, shout out to the 21 million Zcash, like the 21 million Bitcoin, both UTXO based. Now the 21 million Zcash have that zero knowledge cryptography. But as Sterling was pointing out, we can already map that network, right? Well, actually, there's pleasant ambiguity because it's like XMR, like Monero has been able to sort of distribute itself. But once the Winklevi come in, they levy the checkbook offensive, which is why it's now a captive network. However, once you know that, if you know that there is nothing but mathematics between you and your ability to flow your freedom capital, we talk about decentralized freedom capital and freedom liquidity of the people. It's a meme that if your money, if 100% of your assets, you have to log into Coinbase. I'm sorry, Brian, but I don't want to upload my ID and my da-da-da-da-da if I want to move more than $10,000 kind of situation. So we all know if we want to catch the top of this wick, when Litecoin clears $420 a Litecoin, which I fully believe is going to happen, sooner than many folks expect, taking a lesson from Zcash, we know that if all of our assets are in a custodial environment, be it a Coinbase or a Binance or a Fidelity, we will not be able to custody the fruit thereof and take the vast preponderance of the plenty. We're seeing banks levy their greed upon this consequential legislation. Now, again, talk about Gordian solutions. Part of it is them saying, guys, remember, stay complicit in the dance. Let's all pretend together that votes matter while the president is saying maybe votes don't matter. So I see you 70 and 80-year-old, and yes, I too have read the books and been conversant in these letters and would love to, participate in the open source, creation of fruitful legislation that liberates truly free markets. However, if that is going to be stewarded and instituted by tyrants, I will again implement a Gordian solution and say, nay, sir or ma'am, I will take my tomorrow. I don't have children, MF. I don't have a wife, MF. I have loved this country, and my fruit has been my liberty and the free people I meet. So if a lady wants to be in a burqa, I leave her to it. There's mystery in it. But if she wants to be on a bikini in Iran, let's go, But I'm trying to get there with a free market solution bloodlessly by choice. So amen. And that's the thing, Paul. And I appreciate you in the Lion's Den, because the truth is, it really is the math that gets us there. It's the free market solution, because I would say if we let all the ladies in whatever they're wearing have that choice to go, there's a beach, ladies. Are you hot? All right. And if we respect that fine fruit out there being free, as we well should, and again, it is incumbent upon our men and our society to make sure that we're civil. But shout out to France and topless beaches and places where you inculcate into the culture or respect for the finery of freedom. So I'm going to land the plane on shout out to you, Paul. And even though it is so easy to get wild in our passions, especially when we don't have children, and there might be a reason to for someone to fight. And that's the thing. That's the thing, bro. I find myself kind of tap and deep roots and stuff, finding something of a William Wallace in me. And that's the thing, bro, is if someone's got to take the hill first, it probably should be a guy, maybe with a dodgy heart, been in all kinds of the green, but I'm keeping my fruits and vegetables strong. And the thing is, right, my friends are starting to have babies, and I want those babies to have dolphins in the oceans and maybe an elephant or two, damn it. How many elephants do we have, guys? And oddly enough, if we liberate Bitcoin, Litecoin, Cardano, Midnight, because that's the thing, guys, The freedom, whether you know it or not, it's a grand unified UTXO theory. UTXO is distinct from accounts, unspent transaction output, huzzah, open source math. And so when we have enough of the people's capital in our Thor chains, our Houdini swaps, our Maya protocols, our whatever, all those cool things, silent swap and all that good stuff, where we don't have to upload our ID to Brian. Shout out to Brian. Thank you for paying the lawyers. And honestly, thank you because that law isn't right. We really need, because right now, and I'll land the plane on this. We give banks $100,000 of our capital. They fractionalized reserve our 100,000. They borrow, they lend out $1 million. They make 20% on our 100,000 by schnookering and tookering all the law books and whatnot, and then they give us 3%. Meanwhile, we could say, hold on, how about we custody that capital and we make that 15 or 20%? The checking account and the 3% is not sufficient, particularly when we can directly empower the people. So for me, the way that one of the most awesome free market solutions to me is we know inflation is going to be a problem. It just is. $42 trillion national debt will be here probably before 2027 is probably when we're going to clear $42 trillion national debt printed dollars. There will only ever be 21 million Bitcoin then and 84 million Litecoin. And so if I would start it like this: taco trucks in Los Angeles, right? You got these folks that are making families, and you know what? Their revenue on their TikTok marketing makes as much as the taco truck. But what if they say, you know what? We're learning a thing or two about this Litecoin. We decided we're going to lock our profit into Litecoin at the end of the week, right? And then it just starts a thing that, oh yeah, the taco trucks all over Los Angeles Greater Basin lock 20% of their profit into Litecoin. And suddenly those 84 million Litecoin start a GameStop that can't be stopped. And then Nepal, that's why we're in those Discords saying, hey guys, you see how El Salvador made Bitcoin a national currency? What if these young kids in Nepal taking freedom back made Litecoin the national currency of Nepal? And then suddenly you don't have to send dollars back home to your family in the Philippines because they're locking their profit into Litecoin too. So by liberating free markets here, every mom and pop coffee shop in America could actually have a come up if they lock a little bit of their profit, 10% into Litecoin, 10% into Bitcoin. Just do what you do, mom and pop. That's all you got to do. Let freedom ring. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Logos and Share Lambda. Damn, I love the spooky folks out there and the outliers.
Hey, thanks, Cardano. Nice V for Vendetta poetic monologue there. Appreciate you very much. Cool. Paul, go ahead, brother, if you got a response.
I don't know how I could possibly top that monologue that just encompassed all of our thoughts in one. And so yeah, all I can say is that thanks for your thoughts, your heartwarming thanks. And so appreciate you providing any of the kudos and compliments for what we've done and what I've kind of mentioned in other talks and spaces and whatnot. So yeah, thanks for listening, and appreciate that we've got. I mean, you're exactly what Sterling said, is that it's kind of nice to once in a while hop into the echo chamber to feel a little bit of warmth and comfort amidst of the battles with everyone else outside of our world. And you're the epitome of that. You're the warm fuzzy comfort for all of us cypherpunks that we need every so often. We come home from battle. So thank you so much for providing that, because we all need a little bit of that.
I get this image of a cypherpunk coming back home after a long day's hack, right? All dressed in black, sitting on go sit down on grandpa's lap next to the fire and just hear a nice story while sipping on your mocha latte. Yeah, that just nailed it, my man. Cool. All right, we have Corey. We have Corey up here from the Logos Network. Corey, I know that you probably have a lot of nice little comments or thoughts for Paul. We can have maybe a bit of a discussion here. Go ahead, brother. Welcome.
Thanks, man. I definitely won't be as provocative. I'm a little more boring. Paul, you may not remember me. We've had a lot of conversations back in the day when you were Airbits back on the Bitcoin podcast, and you've got to give you credit. You've stuck to the process of trying to implement real privacy solutions with what we had to the mainstream to make it easy to use. And I want to take it back to that process of you were trying to do that and living in the trenches. Because when I think about privacy tech, and I think your story of working with Amir and building on top of the complex solutions to make simple ones for people is an interesting space to live in, and a really, really, really difficult one. When I think about privacy tech, I I think of it as analogous to giving people options. And when you give people too many options, they get options paralysis. They don't know what to choose. Or you confuse them and you make user interfaces that are too hard to get through. So in your space, you're picking options for people just by the nature of taking something complex and making it simple for people. You have to make decisions on their behalf as a developer building software for them. How do you navigate that space? How do you make appropriate decisions for people when you build on something complex that gives a lot of options, such that you're instilling the ideals of the complex thing while making it easy for them to use and helping them navigate that space when they want to do something more than the simple thing? Because that's really hard to do, and I think you've spent a lot of time working through it and thinking about it.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the hardest part of technology as a whole. It's not even unique to privacy, right? If you think about technology as a whole, it's very complex under the hood. And the most successful products are the ones that abstract the right pieces of the technology and expose the right pieces of the technology in order to gain the core benefit the technology was built for in the first place. There's no right answer to this. There's absolutely no right answer to this. And I can't say that we've necessarily found the exact right answer because it doesn't exist. And it's also different for each person. And so how do we navigate that? Uh, we take our best guess. I hate to have like a really shallow answer, but we take our best guess and then we talk to people and ask them and see what works and see what doesn't work, see what problems people run into, iterate on that, just like any other tech company. And I'll be the first to admit that from the really diehard cypherpunk privacy maximalists, many of them will have criticism of what we do, just like Signal has critics, right? How many people have you ever heard say, "Oh, I don't like Signal"? It's from a privacy point of view, not like a UX point of view. They just go, "Oh, I don't like Signal. It's not private enough. No, it's got a backdoor. Oh, I have to give up my phone number." Blah blah blah. Right? Signal had to make a decision. If you look early on, the biggest criticism of Signal was that you had to have a phone number and you connected with people through a phone number. And they made that conscious decision because from a usability point of view, it was very easy to discover other people in your network that were also using Signal, much like Telegram does, much like WhatsApp does, right? And yes, it is a privacy compromise. Like your address book becomes exposed to Signal, at least the phone numbers do. But at the benefit of what? The end-to-end communication, what you type is fully encrypted. They cannot see it. No one can see it but you and the person you're communicating with. So they had to, pick some compromise, and they found what I would say is a good one because they got pretty damn well adopted. And then after that, they implemented handles, which, were probably a complaint that people had. Is like, oh, why do I have to keep on typing someone's phone number into the app in order for me to connect with them? Great, handles, and now QR codes to connect with people. And they iterated on that. So now I no longer have to share my phone number with someone else in order to chat with them on Signal. I still have to share my phone number with Signal, but I don't have to share it with another person that I'm interacting with. Unlike WhatsApp, which is just a cesspool for something that claims to have some level of privacy. And so those kind of compromises are one that, there's no perfect answer. And I invite people to, ask the questions with each app, including Edge, like, hey, what's the compromise for usability? And does it achieve a substantial level of privacy, autonomy, self-custody, all of the values, right? It's not just privacy, but it's also the self-custody, you control your funds, that kind of thing. And is it better at getting to the end goal of the 99% adoption at whatever level of compromise it might entail, right? But absolutely great question. How do we ask ourselves that? It's a tough one. We did recently do one thing, which I think has always been in our mind as a team, but never expressed on like paper, virtual paper, like a website. And we've internally always had a line in the sand that we would draw for, where our privacy sits versus, where we would say, okay, here's some data that Edge might know. We drafted up in a privacy manifesto. And so that's available now on our website. You can probably search for it, Edge Privacy Manifesto. And it will clearly outline, hey, here's where we draw the line. We will not know this information versus these are the things that we might know, right? Under what conditions. And people are welcome to then say, hey, that's good enough for me, or no, I'm going to go to a more difficult to use but more private application to do the functionality that Edge provides. And I think most companies should do that. They should expose exactly what is the privacy, not just a privacy policy, because that's all boilerplate legal garbage, right? I never trust a privacy policy. That's just what lawyers draft up. And so we went further and said, okay, here's a privacy manifesto. Like, here's not just what's like exposed. Here's what we will, ensure we don't do in the future, right? As long as that manifesto's there, we're not going to do this going into the future and what we haven't done in the past. And it's much more nuanced than a privacy policy. Much, much more nuanced. Um, so that's our guiding light now. Now that we've actually written it down versus just talking about it every time, like growth on our team, like the marketing growth says, hey, it'd be great for us to do this promotion where if some user swaps at least $5,000, we can give them a reward. And I said, well, nope, that breaks what we want as privacy, because now we have to know that a single user is associated to these 10 swaps, right? Like, we would have these internal discussions, right, and say, okay, well, what exactly are our privacy rules? Well, boom, now we've outlined it and it's all written down. So feel free to take a look at it, snapshot it, put it on chain, so that way, if it ever changes in the future, you know what it used to be, yeah, right? But that, I think, is our way to answer your question, Corey, is like, how do we navigate that challenge? Well, you draw a line in the sand and then build the best product that you can within your side of that line and know where that line sits.
Really appreciate that. And I think y'all are doing a great job. I could talk about this for ages, but I want to be respectful of your time.
Well, and comment on one thing you said. I absolutely remember our conversations early on in the Urbit days, Corey. You're one of the original ones that, like, gave people through the podcast a lot of information about Bitcoin, talked about the nuanced subjects. I love being on the podcast. I wish it was still going on to this day. And so thanks
kicked
so
it
much
back
for
off.
also being an OG in the space and covering what you did. And so you definitely provided a good amount of value to the ecosystem at the time.
Appreciate that. We still do it. It's just, we just kicked it right back off. Still fun. Still
nice.
having fun conversations.
Awesome. Great to hear.
Yeah, that was a really, really good question. Pulled a lot of nice information out of you there, Paul. Corey did. Good stuff. By the way, your privacy manifesto, I published that underneath the space and then published it to the Megatron. Should be in the Megatron above. If not, it's because of a glitch. But for you guys who want to read the privacy manifesto that Edge wrote, it's there. I haven't actually read it myself, so now that's on the top of the reading list. Sweet. All right, I think now we have two people left to speak. We have technically only 5 minutes left in the space. We can maybe push it just a couple more minutes if Paul's okay with it, so we can get the last of the questions in. I want to make sure it's okay with
For
you,
sure,
Paul.
no problem.
Cool. Okay, so first we have Ashes. Let's try to keep everything as a bit more succinct. Sorry we have to do that, but we do want to be respectful of time. Ashes, welcome to the stage.
Hello, Paul. Hope you are going well. I have a question.
Did Asher drop off, or is it me?
No, you're good, Paul. Ashes, are you there?
I want to join in a Wallet Ambassador program. Can I join now?
I think he asked if he can join Edge Wallet. Is that what you're asking, Ashes?
Edge Wallet.
I didn't quite get the question. You said ask to join. Join. What aspect of join?
I have a question to Paul.
Yes, go right ahead.
I want to join Edge Wallet Ambassador program. Can I join now?
Oh, the ambassador program at Edge. The ambassador program right now, applications are currently closed. We got quite a number of applicants, and we're just our marketing team is chewing through that right now. But it is kind of a rolling program. We expect that some ambassadors will come in. We may grow the program. A few may fall off, and we'll bring some others on there. So I'd say keep your eye out. But right now the applications are closed. I apologize. Thanks so much for the interest in joining the ambassador program. Much appreciated. And so keep an eye out. Definitely follow Edge. on X, and we'll definitely push it out there if we start growing the program and start accepting applications again.
I am following all the posters of Edge Wallet.
I'm
Is
sorry,
there
what
any
was that?
possibility of page two ambassador program?
Yeah, I'd mentioned that I think in the future we'd likely open up applications again, but at this time the applications are closed. Like we got quite a large flood of applicants that we're still going through right now, and so from that we'll kind of push out our first wave of ambassadors. But we expect that this will be a rolling program and we'll be taking on more people in the future, but not at this point.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks a lot for the interest.
Paul, thank you, Sherling.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Ashes. Really appreciate it. Cool. Okay, the last comment / question, Roxana. Welcome to the stage again, my friend.
Hello. Yeah, sorry, I'm late. Hey, Paul. I guess we had a lot of topics today, but one that was really interesting for me is paying your employees with the best option for them, right? Which can be a stable coin, fiat if they opt for, or a privacy coin. And one of the hardest things I've learned is that even if you value a contributor, I'm not talking about logos, I'm talking about my own my separate business. If you value a contributor, you still have to dox him, even though you want to pay him with Monero, for example, because the laws kind of force you to. And if you have an employee, you can't, you have to dox him as well, or her, and you can't retain their information as is, right? So it can't just be, oh, I've seen your work, I've seen your contributions to the GitHub repo, I know you're very good at what you're doing, but unfortunately, even though I opt to pay you with Monero, there needs to be some sort of contract between you and I, whether that's a contractor or employment contract, where you actually dox yourself. So I guess my question was more for Paul. Have you come across this, and are there any ways to protect the identity of a contributor without forcing them to sort of KYC, but have them receive payment for the work that they do?
So unfortunately, based on the legal framework of most countries, we don't see a way of doing that, right? We can obviously obfuscate the flow of funds that and where they come from our company, and as well where they go after they're paid to a contributor. But most countries want to know that someone gets paid for the sake of income tax, and they also want to know that we paid someone for the sake of income tax as well. So I'm not as much of a freedom fighter as I am. The I don't suggest people bypass the existing laws in their country, in their jurisdiction, right? That's not. I don't want more freedom fighters going to jail, right? There's other ways to fight this battle, and if it's even like defunding the government so that they're not able to actually create new rules that then enforce new taxes, then great. Let's get to that point. Let's get to that point using the means that we have, as opposed to just trying to circumvent and potentially getting imprisoned for our efforts. I haven't seen any other way. Probably the only thing that I've seen that circumvents someone knowing that someone is being quote unquote paid is through protocol mining. Because mining is the one way where you are earning money and you don't actually have anyone paying you. There's not a single entity that is paying you, right? It's much like when you go and dig up gold, right? If you go and dig up gold, well, who paid you that value? Well, no one did. You just kind of found it, right? And so that's the single method that I can think of, being a miner, being a validator. But of course, you'd have to obfuscate where you are, where your computers are, where you're burning electricity from because you're paying a bill to someone. You'd have to obfuscate all of that somehow, some way to be able to keep your anonymity, and not tie your identity to the earning of value. Aside from that, if we're a company, we make revenue, we have to pay people. We don't want to get imprisoned for being able to compensate people that want to build freedom tech. And so, yes, we're going to have to, as you had mentioned, dox people. in that sense. Now, doxing the fact that someone earned value from us is one piece of the kind of compromise puzzle. Like I talked about a little bit earlier, like where do companies compromise on product? Well, this is a compromise in operations. While we have to dox people that we are compensating them and the amount that they're being compensated and potentially what asset we're compensating them in, we want to minimize the dox from the viewpoint of whatever they do with that in the future, right? What do you do with that asset after we've sent it to you? As well, not dox ourselves from the viewpoint of, hey, what's our holdings and who else do we pay and how much do we pay them? So minimizing that overall dox is, I think, where we want to sit, but do it in a way that, we're not going to send people to jail, and us as well, not go to prison. We'll fight the battle that we know we can, I fundamentally think that there are enough battles to fight that are not going to send people to prison and achieve our goal versus trying to fully circumvent the current, however draconian they are, the current laws.
Yeah, it's one of those situations, Paul, and I agree with this, and I know that Logos community would largely agree with this. You have to pick and choose your battles, right? If you're just out there, you just try to flout everything. Well, you're not really doing any good for anybody because you're going to end up in prison or in a cage for God knows how long, and that's not the situation that we want to be in. So we want to protect ourselves as much as possible while doing what we can to obtain as much civil liberty, as much privacy, and as much anonymity as possible in our own lives. So we just and really, it's incumbent upon us as individuals to decide what level of privacy and anonymity that we want to take on for ourselves, and what kind of companies we want to work with or do business with or have economic trade with. So I think this is really important. And this is one of the things too. This is a whole nother discussion. But thinking about like the anarchist communities, there's a lot of really pig-headed people who would say that we have to like at all times be principally oriented, and the reality is that's just not the reality that we live in, right? We can try to push for that as much as possible, and we should, but technically when you have like a gun against your throat in a variety of different situations, right, to speak figuratively, I mean, there's really no moral decision there. It's a decision that has to be made based on the context of reality in that moment, right? So but of course, we're always going to do whatever we can to continue pushing the dial toward more freedom, and maybe one day we do reach a point where we achieve that goal. And I think that's the ultimate position that we have to find ourselves in. And this is why all companies and all organizations have to do what they can to protect themselves, or we just don't exist at all, right? And then, of course, there are ways that you can achieve this by, this is why activists and activism and grassroots movement. This is also why I have Logos circles to try to help achieve some level of civic freedom where institutions have largely failed. Right? There are ways to do this without trying to be as like pig-headed as possible. And this is where I'll agree with Paul, and I think most of the people in our community kind of get this point too.
Now, with that said, I think we're very far from this, right? But there is a point where government becomes too coercive and you have to resort to, I hate to bring in the V word, but you have to resort to violence. I don't think we're at that point, right? But to everyone out there, there's a reason why we have the Second Amendment. And so exercise it. It's a signal. Ironically, because, if you're in the US, because obviously anyone here could be anywhere in the world, right? And so you may not be allowed to, but to the degree that you're allowed to, send the signal, especially because like here in the US, guns are KYC'd in a way, right? It's like owning a gun is KYC'd. The bad part about that is it's KYC'd. The good part about that is for every person that owns one and for everyone that they own, you've just sent a signal to the government that don't fuck with us, right? Here's how many of us there are out in the world. And the more people that send that signal, the more in check we put them. And if they choose to really go draconian and really become oppressive, if they're now constantly knocking on our door, not even knocking, just breaking down our doors the way they did with Ian Freeman, for reasons that are both not constitutional and against other local jurisdiction laws, then there will be an uprising, right? And it will be breaking the laws. But that's at the point where the laws are as oppressive as they were in Venezuela. right? So there will be that time, and I don't say like, no, there's never a time for us to actually go and revolt, right, and have a true rebellion. But I think we're very far from that right now, and so let's fight the battle in a way that currently doesn't require it. But I'd also say everyone be prepared for it, right, and send the signal that you're prepared, so that hopefully we can actually have more impact in what we want the government to enforce. Right, because they always have to make that calculation. What's the strength of their army versus what's the strength of ours? And right now, they're like, okay, well, there's some strength in their army, but we'll try to pass laws that are at least somewhat agreeable to at least some of the population. But they can't go full draconian yet, right? And the more so they can't if they know that we're prepared to fight back.
Yeah, some comments on this too. By the way, I'll just rehash the disclaimer here so everybody's clear. Any comments, any thoughts, any ideas that Paul and I share, or anybody else in the space, is the product of our own minds, not affiliated with the Logos brand or the Edge brand for that fact as well. So we'll mention this. So I do think that like violent revolution has created change in a lot of different. I mean, that's how quote unquote
It created this country.
American democracy. Yep, that's where I was headed. But by the same token, there have been movements that have been totally peaceful that have ousted violent regimes. So, of course, we saw this with the Parallel Polis movement in Czech, which resulted in the Velvet Revolution. Gandhi has proven this as well with the concept of satyagraha or peace force. So there are also ways to do this peacefully. But there are, and that's not to say there aren't elements of violence that may emerge throughout the process of these movements. But there are ways to also impact change at that level as well. And this is not discounting or disagreeing with what you said, Paul. I do. Obviously, there's some situations where people get trapped in where they feel like they don't have any other choice, and that's what they resort to. So anyway, I think this conversation is one that we should certainly have, because one of the things at Logos we're very fond of, like keeping the channels of communication open, and having this brought up, I think, is really important that it gets discussed. That's my personal opinion, at least on that matter. So, but we can maybe do this again and get into this at some point.
Sounds great.
Cool. All right. Well, I want to thank Paul again. Thanks for coming onto the space, and thank you for spending so much time with us, brother. What you're doing at Edge Wallet, and what the community really is doing with regard to enhancing the privacy communication, not just privacy itself, but being able to interface with the greater population, being able to talk to people about what we're doing as quote unquote cypherpunks or crypto anarchists, is just so incredibly valuable. And you coming to talk to us about it, and also to remind us that just having an echo chamber to discuss these things isn't always as valuable as being able to also get some degree of mainstreamization of privacy. I think that's the takeaway message, or at least as I understood it in this space. So thanks again for coming on, Paul. By the way, I want to remind everyone that we do these spaces, of course, every Tuesday is the Logo Circle. Also on Thursday space, we'll have guests like Paul, and we'll continue these discussions around surveillance and privacy. Also, a reminder that a lot of the topics that we discussed today are also discussed in Jared and Peter's book, Farewell to Westphalia. I do recommend that you pick that up. You can get the open source version for free. I shared the link above along with Paul's privacy manifesto. So do please pick that up. Let's all continue this conversation. Let's take a page out of Paul's book and go out and spread this message of privacy and freedom. Let's talk about our tools. Let's talk about the ideas, the philosophies, and the technologies. I think we're moving into a better world where actually this transition couldn't be happening at a better time right now, especially with the surveillance regime that's been at our throats for so long. So thanks everyone for being here. Thanks again, Paul. With love from Logos, we wish you all a good day and goodwill. Thanks for all the OGs that have been on the space since the beginning, and thanks all the new faces here. Don't forget to follow the Logos account. Follow anybody who's up here. Definitely follow Paul and Edge. Thanks again, brother.